Hi, I'm Abby from Rtings.com. Today we're reviewing the LG B3. The B3 is LG's mid-range OLED offering in their 2023 lineup and features some great improvements over its predecessor, the B2, such as improved image processing and support for DTS audio pass-through. It comes in 55, 65, and 77-inch sizes, and there are some variants found specifically for Costco. This review covers them all as we expect them all to perform the same. Even with these improvements though, how does the LG B3 compare to the rest of the TV market? Is it a worthy mid-range model, or could you do better? We'll answer that and more, but first, let's look at the design. The LG B3 looks similar to the rest of LG's OLEDs. The screen is thin, framed by thin bezels, and the back panel has a nice textured plastic design to look like brushed metal. Overall, it feels well built and supported by its center stand, though there's a little wobble. Unfortunately, the stand isn't adjustable, so if you have a soundbar placed in front of the TV, you'll block the lower portion of the screen and the sensor for the remote. Wall mounting the TV is an option thanks to the VESA mounting holes on the back, but you lose easy access to the inputs, and if you have anything plugged into those ports, you can't mount your TV flush against the wall. The inputs on the back of the TV include two HDMI 2.1 ports, so not having access to them is a bit of an issue if you're using a next-gen console like a PS5 or Xbox Series X. One of them is also the eARC port that supports audio pass-through with a soundbar, so that's also a bit of a problem. Otherwise, there are two easy-to-reach regular HDMI ports along the side. There's also a tuner, but it only supports ATSC 1.0, so you can't use it to get 4K over-the-air channels. In terms of cable management, there's a single clip along the back of the stand, which is great for the power cable or inputs along the back, but might otherwise be a little janky for those on the sides. The LG B3 has decent sound quality. It's on par with most other TVs released this year. It's good enough for dialogue to sound clear and coherent, but otherwise you won't get the immersive home theater experience without a proper soundbar and subwoofer setup. Lastly, regarding the TV's remote, it's the same LG Magic remote they've used for years. There's a mic built into it, but not into the TV, so you'll have a bit more privacy that way. The remote is on the larger side, but at least it has quite a few options, from actual numeric buttons to a central button that works with the point and press feature. Turning this thing on, the TV greets you with the WebOS interface, LG's proprietary system. It's fast, easy to use, and supports the creation of different user profiles, so you can customize the homepage depending on who's watching. Despite the great interface, there are still ads you can't disable. You can disable targeted ads from the home screen, but you can't get rid of ads entirely. So, now that the TV is up and running, let's just take a look. The screen handles reflections well. It gets bright enough to fight glare in bright rooms, but compared to mini LED TVs or more expensive OLEDs, it looks dim. It really looks its best in a dark room setting. But no matter where you look at the TV, you'll have a good picture as it has outstanding viewing angles. There's a slight shift in the colors if you watch it from a more extreme angle, but overall it's well suited for large seating areas with a sectional or other off-center seating. The picture quality is one of the main reasons to buy an OLED, and the B3 is no exception. It has a nearly infinite contrast ratio with deep inky blacks that create an immersive experience while watching in a dark room. There's also no blooming around bright objects, so if you're a fan of subtitles, you won't have to worry about the bottom half of your image getting washed out by halos. Similarly, as every pixel on an OLED is self-emissive, it can show bright objects moving across the screen with no blooming tails or halos, and the algorithm keeps up with fast-moving objects well. Brightness is where the B3 drops off a bit. Literally. It's okay, but it doesn't get as bright as some competitors in this price range, like the Sony A75L. Even the precursor, the LG B2, gets brighter than the B3. Some of this brightness decrease is partly thanks to its aggressive automatic brightness limiter, which dims larger areas like a hockey rink or a snowy setting. But turning the ABL feature off reduces the screen brightness for any scene to about 260 nits. That said, if you're watching in a dark room, it'll still be bright enough to be satisfying. Unfortunately, it isn't much better in HDR. It pushes just over 500 nits, which is still decent, but again, compared to other OLED models in this price range, like the A75L and the B2, the B3 isn't all that bright. At least the PQ EOTF tracking is good. With HDR10 content, it's nearly flawless, but there's a sharp cutoff with most content as it surpasses the TV's peak brightness. So in really bright scenes, bright details get lost. For content mastered at 4000 nits, the TV has a slower roll-off, which helps preserve the details. There are some dynamic tone mapping features built into the TV to help limit the hard cutoff, but it won't be too noticeable or distracting overall. Regarding colors, the LG B3 has fantastic DCI-P3 coverage and good coverage of the wider Rec 2020 color space. The tone mapping is a bit off, especially with green, so the colors aren't super accurate. The colors won't look as vivid or bright as an OLED using a QD OLED panel, but the B3 can still handle darker, saturated colors with no problem. So that's the design and the picture quality. What about the processing? Well, the LG B3 uses LG's A7 AI processor Gen 6, an update over the B2. This latest generation processor delivers an improved upscaling performance, so you won't lose too many fine details if you're streaming low-resolution content. Interestingly, there's little improvement in the smoothing aspect, and the B3 performs just as well as the B2. Similar to upscaling, some fine details are lost, but overall, low-quality content is watchable without distracting macro blocking or pixelation. The gradient handling is decent enough, there's noticeable banding in the entire range of grays and greens, but hey, at least the red is smooth! This might be annoying if you're a fan of nature documentaries or black and white films, as the gradients won't be seamless. So, we've covered the design, the picture quality, and the processing. What about gaming? Well, game mode doesn't really improve things. Not that we expected it to, as it's usually worse, but in this case, it's about the exact same. The peak brightness in HDR is still only decent, hovering around the 520 nit mark, and the highlights are still pretty dim. Thankfully though, the TV supports FreeSync and HDMI 4 VRR and is G-Sync compatible certified, so you'll have a tear-free experience with any VRR-enabled source. Thanks to its low frame rate compensation feature, it supports a wide range of refresh rates, which helps when the refresh rates drop very low, like sub 20 Hz. The B3 supports a refresh rate of up to 120 Hz with 4K content with both the PS5 and Xbox Series X. It also supports 1440p at 120 Hz, giving it a slight edge over the Sony A75L, which lacks 1440p support. Plus, the B3 has a near instantaneous response time, so you won't have to worry about blur and ghosting while you play, though there is a slight amount of persistence blur just due to the nature of OLED tech. You also won't have to worry about flickering from the backlight, as there's only slight brightness drops that pulse with the TV's refresh rate, but this is normal behavior that isn't noticeable in practice. And finally, the B3's input lag is also very low, resulting in a responsive and immersive gaming experience. There's even a boost mode setting in the game optimizer menu that helps to reduce the input lag further. So, now we're at the main question. Should you buy this TV? The quick answer is yes. You'll have a very good viewing experience from a mid-range or more entry-level OLED. And the B3 is a versatile option that's good for streaming content and gaming, making it a great bang-for-buck choice. The performance isn't the detracting part here, as the tricky accessibility of the HDMI 2.1 ports on the back might be a deal breaker if you're looking to wall mount your TV, and the unmoving TV stand means you'll have to put a bit more thought into your media console setup if you have a soundbar. Plus, the lower brightness might be disappointing if you're used to a mini LED TV or plan on using it in a bright space. That said, the upgrade, the LG C3, is well worth it if you'd prefer a sleeker, more user-friendly design, a more powerful processor, and higher brightness both in and out of game mode. The C3 also has 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, making it the better option for hooking up consoles and a sound system. The C3 often sells for around the same price point as the B3 when it's on sale, so if you're debating which one to get, just get the C3. While the Sony A75L is the main competitor to the B3, the Sony's price point tends to come in a bit higher, closer to the C3's. The Sony boasts better processing, which might be worth it if you tend to watch a lot of low-quality content, and its picture quality will be better no matter what you're watching. But it's slower for gaming and doesn't support 1440p resolutions. The Sony a75L might only be the better option if you aren't planning to game using any of those features. Well, that's all for our review of the LG B3. You can read all the nitty-gritty details in the written review on our website. The link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Abby from Rtings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs.